Imagine staring into a vast, unstructured dataset, 455 distinct nodes floating in a digital void, completely disconnected from one another. This specific cluster of names is drawn from a document formally titled the Princess Heartline Third Batch Official Directory. Looking closely at the individual data points reveals a bizarre content selection. The entries aren't geopolitical operatives or historical figures, they are celebrities, pop stars, and cultural icons, heavily concentrated in Philippine and global media. This pop culture dataset operates as a highly rigorous relational database designed to govern complex interactions. The architecture operates on three distinct levels. It begins with a strict deterministic hierarchy, sorting every individual into a permanent status tier. That rigid sorting is then intentionally fractured by a second layer of controlled randomization, grouping these individuals into competing political factions. Finally, a third scaling layer plugs these isolated microfactions directly into the massive infrastructure of real-world global governance. To understand how this specific schema operates, we have to reverse engineer the document from the bottom layer up, examining how it builds a functional blueprint for a simulated global matrix. We return to the raw dataset, the 455 unorganized names. The first rule applied to this system is strict stratification. Every single node receives a permanent deterministic value assignment. At the absolute top of this structure are 24 individuals designated as the core main names. They represent the highest operational value within the directory. Below them, the status drops sequentially into precise groupings. We see 24 official members, followed by 24 extended members, and 30 legacy members. The base is formed by a 45-member reserves roster. In any simulated environment, this kind of rigid tier system serves a highly specific purpose. It sets the mathematical baseline for how much power, reach, and value each entity holds. But a completely ordered system has a critical flaw. It lacks the friction and unpredictability necessary to simulate actual sociopolitical behavior. Left entirely alone, this taxonomy generates nothing but a static caste system. The nodes possess rank, but no internal momentum to drive interaction. For the matrix to produce dynamic scenarios, the foundational hierarchy has to be deliberately shattered by a new variable. The architecture achieves this through a specific mechanism labeled the group twist. The total population is sectioned off into 24 rigid containers, referred to in the document as castlemate teams. The entire directory is rapidly shuffled across these groups, completely ignoring their initial tier status to indiscriminately mix core, legacy, and reserve nodes. These new containers are not floating independently in the data void. They are subject to a protocol we can identify as political anchoring. Each individual faction, containing roughly 19 to 21 members, is explicitly tethered to a sitting, real-world Philippine senator. We observe this dissonance clearly in the Ivory Palace group. It holds pop figures operating directly under the jurisdiction of Senator Amy Marcos. This creates immediate systemic tension. A top-tier core member might find themselves isolated in a faction completely disconnected from their usual high-value allies.
Conversely, a lowest-tier reserve node is instantly granted simulated leverage simply by their proximity to a high-profile senatorial anchor. It forces the purely cultural avatars of the dataset to function within the strict constraints and political vectors of actual legislative power. This bipartite mapping of cultural figure to politician is executed symmetrically across all 24 castlemate factions. By executing the group twist, the matrix turns a simple alphabetical list into a highly volatile microsimulation capable of calculating thousands of unpredictable relationship dynamics. Mapping these internal group politics is merely the second layer of the design. The system scales up dramatically by taking these randomized microfactions and plugging them into massive geopolitical spheres. The entities within the directory are structurally assigned to major transcontinental blocks, integrating them into regional pacts like the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. It extends their reach into global security architectures, mapping relationships directly onto international military defense treaties like NATO. The protocol then drills down into highly specialized intergovernmental organizations, embedding these avatars within the subsidiary bodies of the United Nations. We see precise mappings to scientific and health authorities like the World Health Organization, and connections to the rigorous financial constraints of the International Monetary Fund. The system integrates domains of human religious and cultural identity, aligning avatars with traditions from Catholicism at the Vatican to Sunni and Shia Islam. It even dictates the physical infrastructure required to sustain them, assigning specific global satellite networks and terrestrial broadcasters. This creates a deliberate and extreme contrast. An entry for a cultural figure like Olivia Rodrigo is being processed through the exact same simulation matrix that controls international military and economic policy. Grounding these hypothetical avatars within planetary frameworks forces any simulated action to obey the heavy physics of global governance. By anchoring the groups to immovable structures like the UN and international finance, the simulation restricts pure fantasy. It guarantees that the internal chaos of the factions will always generate realistic consequences. We can now observe the architecture functioning as a complete unit. At the base, 455 raw cultural data points are structured into a rigid 5-tier taxonomy of value. In the middle, the group twist shatters that hierarchy, injecting calculated chaos by scattering the nodes across 24 localized factions governed by active senators. And at the apex, those factions are permanently wired into the immovable mechanics of the United Nations, global defense grids, and international trade. The resulting schema requires tracking an immense density of intersecting variables, calculating status, location, political alignment, and global institutional limits simultaneously. Treated strictly as an exercise in data structuring, the Princess Heartline third batch operates as an advanced masterclass in simulation design. Its efficiency relies entirely on its dual nature, engineering extreme volatility at the individual level while applying absolute order at the macro scale. This architecture provides a comprehensive, highly scalable blueprint for modeling human capital against the harsh requirements of the global geopolitical order.